the Zoom so we can post it for later reference. So welcome again to Sahyadri Alpine style. This will be a similar session to yesterday. Today's session was hosted by Praveen from Swapbook. Praveen seems to have a few issues to connect to the session, so I think I'll get started. He can always connect in a while and share a few words at the end of the session. So the session is running on Instagram Live. I see a lot of people joining on Insta. The session is also available on Zoom with much better quality readability of the slides at the URL tinyurl.com/hemaweb. So at that Zoom URL, you'll get a much better view of the slides. So if possible, zoom in rather than Insta. Okay, let's get started. So again, here are the URLs through which you can view this live session. It will take around 40 minutes to go through the presentation, followed by a 20-minute Q&A session, either through the Instagram comments or the chat comments in the Zoom session. The full recording, Zoom recording, will be posted on ultrajourneys.org, my blog, for future reference. First, a short word of thanks to the people who helped me during my Sahyadri mission. I'll close a few windows here so the recording is proper. I want to thank Kedar and Varun from Pune, two friendly friends who hosted me for several weeks before, during, and after the climbing of 204 through the Sahyadris. Also, my thanks to Raw Adventure Solutions from Pune and Saini from Mumbai under the Instagram ID Girl on the Mountains, who provided a lot of inputs to me for making this possible. So today I'll be talking for 30-40 minutes on the following topics. I'll start with a small small introduction on myself, my running history, my recent ultra journeys in the last couple of years, and then a couple of sessions, basically how I was able to traverse 200 forts from Nasik all the way to Satra in a self-supported Alpine style way. So I'll talk about maps and navigation, my minimalist gear approach, how to hike fast in the mountains with minimal gears. How did I manage the weather and shelter, the night stay, the planning of the food ration? What was it financially? How much does it cost me to spend a couple of months in the mountains? And then basically a few slides on outdoor ethics. So let's get started. My name is Peter van Geit. I was born and grew up, did my studies in Belgium. Here you can see me in minimalist outfit on the beach in Belgium during the early years. So I basically had the luck of growing up on the outskirts, the green outskirts of a small village in Belgium. I grew up in a farm of my parents. Was always close to nature, always very active in sports, swimming in the lakes, running in the neighborhood, cycling, playing soccer. So I think that early exposure to outdoors, living close to nature and sports, physical activity, made a huge impact on later life, as we will see. After finishing my Masters of Computer Science, I was deployed by my Belgium-based multinational IT company in India for work in Chennai. But let aside be the work, sitting in a cubicle from Monday to Friday, I immediately kind of started exploring the natural beauty of India during the weekends and during the holidays. Here you can see a photo taken near the Kardungla on the way from Leh Ladakh to the Nubra Valley in the year 2000, using my solo travel actually on my Enfield Lightning, a 535cc machine, carrying all my gears along with me. So almost all weekends of the years in the first couple of years in India, I spent all my time actually exploring the lesser known roads, both in the Western Ghats and the Himalayas. 1 decade later then, I left the roads and I started exploring the jungles of South India, Karnataka, Kerala, Andhra, and Tamil Nadu. So I started a group called the Chennai Trekking Club. basically a non-profit volunteer-based organization that was initially doing a lot of hiking. So we started it in 2008, and over the years in 2010, it became 40,000 people actually. The beauty about the group is it's not commercial, it's fully volunteer-based, non-profit. So the ambience, the culture in the group is amazing. We did a lot of sports activities, running, cycling, open water swimming, triathlons, ultra races, and also did a lot of environmental activities like tree plantations. Once a year, we used to clean up 50 tons of garbage from the beaches in Chennai. And then also the group was extremely active in rescue, rehabilitation, and relief during the Chennai floods and the recent Gaja cyclone. A little bit about running. So I'm a passionate ultra running. This started around 2013 when I started running small neighborhood loops in the city around my house. Initially, we did the 10 by 10, so 10 days running 10 kilometers every day. That soon transformed into half and full marathons. And then very soon I was tired of running on the tar road in the cities and started running in beautiful places like here, the Pangi Valley, one of my favorite places in the Himalayas, on a 700-kilometer run from Shimla to Jammu. So these were fully self-supported runs, again with minimal luggage, just getting a basic shelter and snacks with me and staying in the villages along the way. Then in 2017, I made actually a big decision to change my life completely. I was working as, for the last 2 decades almost, sitting in a cubicle in a multinational corporate, Monday to Friday, only had the weekends and say 4 weeks of paid leave during the entire year to put the participants on mute so the sound remains clear. Nice. Excuse me, yeah, okay. So I was actually getting tired of having not enough time whenever I went, say, for 2 weeks to the Himalayas. As soon as I started running or hiking there, I was counting down the number of days I could spend there. So excluding the travel to North India, hardly like 10 to 12 days remained to actually explore the mountains. And then again, I had to rush back to again sit in my cubicle the next Monday. So I made a big decision then in July, summer 2017, to quit this corporate job, switch to a more minimalist lifestyle from a big earner in the cities and consumer. I switched to becoming focusing on the basics and living a minimalist lifestyle in the mountains after that. At this moment, I was a free man, basically could go for what I call ultra journeys, long journeys of several months, covering thousands of kilometers in the mountains. And that was feeling like complete freedom. I was not on a schedule there, was not mentally stressed having to go back to my cubicle 10 days later. Okay, so the first big ultra journey I did after quitting my job was immediately I took a flight to Vietnam, Hanoi, and I went on a 2,000-kilometer solo run through the mountains, northeast mountains of Vietnam, running basically 50 continuous days, 1 marathon every day. So 50 times 40 gave me around 2,000 kilometers of range through these beautiful places. The journey was again fully self-supported, so I was just running with a 10-liter backpack with a small sleeping mat, tarpaulin sheet to cover myself from the cold and the rain during the night. And given the fact that there were a lot of villages spread all over Vietnam, it was pretty easy to find shelter and food along the way. Then my biggest mission so far was the last 2 summers, 2018-19, where I spent roughly 6 months covering 5,000 kilometers in the high passes, the lesser known routes of the Himalayas, mostly following the footsteps of the shepherds. I covered more than 225,000 meter elevation gain, which is roughly 25 times the height of Mount Everest, which is much more intense, much more draining and calorie intensive than those 5,000 kilometer horizontal distance. I was able to cover 160 passes over roughly the same number of days, 180 days, almost 1 pass every day, and experienced amazing hospitality in those 500 remote hamlets, mountain tribes, villages, and semi-nomadic settlements which I encountered on the way. Here was my traverse. I started at the border of Nepal, crossed Kumaon and Garhwal here, the entire breadth of Uttarakhand, over 30 passes. In June, jumped over to the Great Himalayan National Park, then explored the whole Dolador near Dharmasala, jumped across to the Chamba Valley, and then was hip-hopping between Chamba and Lahore through the Pir Panjal range. Then when the monsoon, northwest monsoon hits full swing, the lower Himalayas, I migrated to the high ranges, the high altitude desert here of Zanskar, Lahore, and Ladakh, basically, where I covered another 50, 60 passes. So then after returning from the Himalayas in September last year, I was thinking what to do next. I was looking for another destination where I could run for a couple of months over thousands of kilometers, somewhere in south, escaping the harsh winter climate from north. So then that's when my eye fell on the Sahyadris, the Western Ghats in Maharashtra. I had already climbed a couple of forts in the previous year, like Singat, Rajgat, Torna, and Raigat. I also did the AMK traverse during 2018. So during this time, I wanted to basically, I saw that from Nasik to Mahabaleshwar, it's almost 600 kilometers into the Ghats, and I was wondering whether I could explore this entire section, trying to cover maximum forts as possible. So being pretty unknown, completely kind of almost new to the Sahyadris, I started compiling a list of forts, contacting some of my friends on Instagram, which had been posting beautiful pictures, especially during the monsoon of the Sahyadris, and also looking at some public hiking databases, which listed a lot of the forts in the Sahyadris. I eventually came up with a list of 200 forts and started mapping these forts on one big map you see here, both the Konkan side as well as the Sahyadris, the Deccan Ridge, where the Deccan Plateau drops steeply into the Konkan Plains. So in order to approach these 200, obviously I could not proceed random, as it would take months and months to cover all these forts without like a logical sequence. So I split up this traverse in, first of all, 4 what I call trans routes. Trans routes are basically beautiful routes, off-road trails through wilderness, through the mountains, connecting some 50 forts initially through 4 trans routes. Started running from Lonavala along the Deccan Ridge through Bhimashankar to Nanagat, which covered 10 forts. Then from Nanagat proceeded further to Harishandragat, all the way to the Bandardara Reservoir, looping in another 15 forts in one section. From there, I traveled towards the Mumbai side and was able to connect 13 forts in one single traverse around the Matharan range. Followed again by finally from Pune, going to Katraj, Singat, Rajgat, Torna, Raigat, then to Lingana, Kavli and beyond, all the way to Mahabaleshwar. Was able again to run between 15 forts on the way. So this initially gave me 50 plus forts just on foot. Remaining forts, if you can see on the map, were quite spread out. You had forts all the way north from Nasik, southeast, the northern Konkan side, the southern Konkan side, and then quite a few forts around Satra, as well as the Pauna Tamini section. So these are basically spread out over thousands of kilometers, mostly connected by roads. So here I decided not to run, as I prefer running in the mountains, in the trails, and I just borrowed a motorcycle from a friend in Pune and decided to traverse from fort to fort, base to base, and then basically climb these different forts in those different regions. First region was Nasik North, the Ajanta Satmal range, where you have 15 forts, fully along one single traverse. So those 15 forts are pretty close to each other. Within 3 days, doing 5 forts on a day, I was able to complete the entire range. Second range was then Nasik North, the Selbari and Dolbari ranges further north, another 20 forts. Then I came down towards west of Nazik, the Trimbak range, 9 forts, followed by south, the Kalsubai range, which has around 10 peaks and forts, beautiful place. Proceeding south furthest is the Harishchandra Dutt Wildlife Sanctuary, 10 forts. Then I was going south of Lonavala towards the Pauna Lake and the Kamini Ghat, where you have some 15 more touristic forts. Proceeding further to Mumbai North, south, where you have some 10 forts south of the metro. Then going north to Mumbai, 12 forts along the Konkan side, north of Mumbai. Finally, I had around 150, 140 forts done, and I was able to cover another 30 forts in a single line, all the way from Mumbai to the border with Maharashtra, called the Konkan South, to finally finish with 30 forts in the Satara region. So Satara region is a little bit outside the Sahyadris. These are more like land forts on smaller hills, not as majestic as the high ranges on near Nasik. So how did I manage this? How, as somebody completely new to the Sahyadris, how was I able to traverse all these 200 plus forts, Alpine style, fully self-guided without using any local guides from the village? So initially what I did is I went through the public databases from Rambler and Wikiloc, which lists tens of thousands of hiking routes all around the world. Many hikers here internationally upload trails, also in the Sahyadris. You'll find hundreds of routes from the base village to the top of the forts available in these websites. So out of the 200 forts and 190 forts, I could download GPS logs from these public databases. The remaining 10 roughly forts, I started looking at Google satellite maps, zooming in at high detail. And the beauty about these high-res sat maps is that if you zoom in detail, you can actually spot even single trails, like you can see contrast in the terrain and the landscape. Just a trail 30 centimeter wide, you can clearly see on the satellite map to basically put markers around this trail and download these reference points in your phone for navigation in the field. So putting all this together, I downloaded all these GPS logs and manually marked trails on the satellite map in my phone in what I call the application OSM-AMD, OpenStreetMaps for Android. Basically a mobile viewer for OpenStreetMaps. OpenStreetMaps has a benefit compared to Google Maps that it has a lot of detail even outside the cities, in the mountains, in the outdoors. You'll see mountain ranges, lakes, smaller villages and trails, which you don't find in Google. And the beauty is the maps are downloadable. So you can download the entire map of Maharashtra in your phone, after which you can simply put the phone in flight mode, save battery, and basically navigate completely independent of mobile signal. Additionally, another beautiful feature about OSM is that you can download contour lines also offline. So contour lines basically show the steepness of the terrain. Wherever the contour lines are spaced close to each other, the slope of the mountain will be very steep. Wherever the contour lines are spaced more evenly, as on this ridge, for example, on the way to Sakira and Kalsubai, the terrain will be less steeper and it will be easier to climb up. So being aware of the elevation of the terrain, of the steepness of terrain, is essential for any hiker in the mountains. And having those contours available again in the palm of your hand offline makes it easy to navigate all by yourself. Another beautiful feature about OSM-AMD, the application, is that I could plan a multi-day journey. I could mark all the forts in one single sequence on my map and basically proceed sequentially, optimizing travel distance and quickly climbing sometimes 6 to 8 forts in a single day. All these maps, the routes to 200 plus forts, videos, presentations, news, and interviews you can find on my blog, ultrajourneys.org. If you're interested to go away from the crowded touristic places and explore some of these beautiful lesser known forts, please have a look at the many maps available on the blog. In the coming slides, I'll tell a couple of ways how I approached this long 2-month journey, climbing 200 forts in a record pace. One of the key factors was going fast by being minimalist. Most of the hikers usually carry easily 5 to 10 kilograms back, a lot of foods, quite a bit of heavy tent sleeping bags. My approach is totally different. I go minimalist. I have minimum gears, just maximum 2 kilograms in a 10-liter backpack. This will include my food and my shelters. Here you can see all my luggages unpacked at the base of Alang. You can see a 500-gram bivy here, a very lightweight single-person tent, which will keep me safe from the cold nights, the wind and the rain. And a single dress, basically, I don't carry extra clothes, just a single dry fit, breathable t-shirt and shorts to go very light. Every 100 gram basically counts when you climb up steeply on these steep pinnacles, even more so in the Himalayas where you will climb at much higher altitudes. Weather and shelter then. So again, the Sahyadris have hundreds of small villages sprinkled among them. So shelter is never much of a problem. 90% of the time you end up in some village at the end of the day where you can settle down even without pitching up a bivy or a tent inside a public school or a temple. And in many cases, again, people will be very hospitable. People will invite you into their home and host you into their own home, sometimes in their own beds. So in those cases where you end up somewhere at the end of the fort or the pinnacle at the end of the day, the sun is setting, and you don't want to go again in the darkness to the next village for a couple more hours, you basically carry your basic gear set, your night stay gears with you. In this case, just 200 gram sleeping mat, a 500 gram bivy, and 600 gram sleeping bag. So for 1.2 kilogram, you can safely pitch up anywhere. And no matter what weather, actually, weather conditions, even in the cold or rain, you're safe. And also, if you camp inside forests, the small bivy kept me safe from any insects and reptiles. Food, here you can see my favorite dish, bakri, on Harish Chandragat, cooked by one of the local people there. So again, food, I never carried food with me. Food is again extra weight. So if you optimize your ration, you just carry a few snacks and you eat well in the villages in between. You can actually, you never have to carry food along with you. You can always eat foods in the morning and the evenings as you take a break in the village for that night halt. And during the day, you can just manage with a few snacks, further reducing your luggage. Then hospitality is there to back you up. So especially as a solo traveler going again away from the remote touristic places, more to the remote, lesser known places, you typically end up in remote settlements where people are very friendly, very innocent, totally different than the attitude in the cities. You will experience amazing hospitality. Many cases you settle down in the temple of a village and it hardly takes 30 minutes for any of the villagers to come and pick you up, invite you into their home, give you a hot, fresh, organically cooked meal from the local farm, which has so much energy, so much nutrition to replenish the calories you lost during the day. You will end up sometimes sleeping in the bed of a person while the person is sleeping on the floor next to you. So in addition to the beautiful nature, this heartwarming hospitality really keeps you going for long journeys. Hydration again, many of the hikers, both in the Sahyadris and the Himalayas, and even some of the locals, local guides or porters, everyone these days seems to be drinking bottled water, which in my view is chemically dead water. It's much better to drink fresh natural waters from the streams, from the village wells, and in the high passes from the melting snow and glaciers. Spending 4 months in the Himalayas and 2 months in the Sahyadris, I've always drink natural waters, which feel so good, help in digestion, gives you much more energy and nutrition than chemically dead water you buy in the shops. You also don't carry water generally with you. So before climbing a fort, you just drink 1 liter of water in the last village, fill up your stomach, which will keep you easily going for 2-3 hours to climb up the fort. Very light, not carrying 1-2 kilograms of food. Coming down again and again, drinking after you come back from the fort. Hygiene, how do you spend 2 months without proper stay anywhere with bathroom or shower? So again, not a problem. Especially the Sahyadris in the lower altitudes have a lot of water bodies, lakes, rivers, wells and streams where you can take a dip at the end of the day to refresh yourself because you only carry one single dress, one t-shirt, one short. So it's important to take a dip once in a while to refresh your one and only set of clothes. Power management is very important given the fact that you're exploring a new place, unknown routes which are totally new to you. Some of the routes to the forts which are lesser used are not very obvious. So you're completely depending on the maps in your phone, the electronic maps. So power management is important. Sometimes in some of the remote parts of the Sahyadris, you might not see a village for the entire day. So it's important to optimize your battery use. The phone is used for navigation, for photography, videography, even some offline blogging. So in that way, I always put my phone in flight modes and battery savings modes, which easily gives me 2 days of battery on a phone which at least is not older than 1 year. So I can go 2 days without recharging my phone. I always carry a 10,000 mAh power bank with me, which gives me another 2 charges. So giving me an independent power sufficient span of 6 days, which is even sufficient for the remote traverses in Ladakh and Zanskar. Financially then, many people are asking questions. How do you manage it to go for months all together in the mountains? How do you manage financially? So again, it's very simple. I mean, life in the cities is pretty expensive. Your rent, your travel, your transport, your foods, everything in the city is all about consumption, products. You buy a lot of unnecessary materialistic items. Once you go to the mountains, actually, you automatically become a minimalist. Especially if you hike for long distances, you want to optimize your luggage so you're not going to carry unneeded stuff. The people in the remote mountains are not interested in money, so nobody's actually looking at your money if you're staying, as long as you're staying away from the touristic spots. If you're self-sufficient, which means you never stay in hotels, you never use transportation, private transportation, you always go by your own means, either running, public transport, or you camp out, then your only expense is basically food. And food is very cheap in the mountains. You will hardly spend like 50 rupees for a meal, for a plate of momos in Ladakh, or a plate of bakris somewhere in a small village in the Sahyadris. So with 200 rupees per day, you can easily manage your food costs. In the Himalayas, I crossed 120 passes over 4 months. So I spent 200 rupees a day, 5,000 rupees in a month, or 20,000 rupees for the entire summer, covering 120 passes, which basically means I spent hardly 200 rupees for a single pass, where again, going solo exploration mode, rather than paying the same 15 or 20,000 rupees to a commercial group for doing a single pass. A few slides on outdoor ethics. So as I was already mentioning, 99% of the hikers, wherever it is in the Himalayas or in the Sahyadris also, seem to go to 5% of the places. So everybody goes basically with hundreds and sometimes thousands of people during weekends and holidays to the same spots, putting unnecessary environmental pressures on these ecologically sensitive places, polluting with human waste, polluting with plastic bottles, and causing also noise pollution, obviously scaring the wildlife. So instead of that, I think we should all learn to stay away from, touristic places, become a little bit more self-sufficient, go Alpine style, get familiar with maps, with navigation, and explore some of the tranquil, peaceful places out there, which in many cases are much more enjoyable. It's nice to go to a beautiful unknown fort in the Sahyadris all by yourself, rather than being surrounded by 1,000 people on the top of Raigat or Rajgat. Again, navigation in those touristic places, of course, is very simple. You don't need maps. Even if the routes are not very clear, you just follow the trail of plastics to find your way, which again is very sad. Animals might be attracted to these bright colored plastics, eat it, and suffocate if it gets stuck in their digestive system. Another very sad thing to see is that many of the ancient heritage here on the base of Brahmagiri, a small temple, fully written over by people visiting these places, so having no respect to the history of Maharashtra or to this beautiful heritage. And then also on the other end of the spectrum, you can see some positive things along the way, like here a group of volunteers and villagers restoring one of the water tanks on the forest near the Fauna Lake, which is a very good initiative sponsored by some IT employees in Pune who set aside some of their salary at the end of the month to pay the villagers and helping them to restore these ancient artifacts. So that was it. I hope this gives you a little bit of a high-level overview of my 2 months Trans-Sahyadri mission across 200 forts. If you want to get more inspiration, check out the videos and the photos on my Instagram account. Or again, you'll find a lot of maps, routes, presentations, training materials, webinars, interviews, and videos on my blog, ultrajourneys.org. Currently, I'm also running an Himalayan webinar series, 15 minutes daily series at 8 o'clock in the morning live and posted later on Instagram on trekking in the Himalayas, all the learnings of traversing more than 160 passes in the last 2 years. Beautiful webinars. I suggest you look at some of these. You can find them on the blog and on Instagram. And then people interested in really exploring the lesser known places, going by themselves rather than paying a lot of money to the commercial hiking groups, do have a look at my navigation bootcamp webinar series, which is available for free again on the blog ultrajourneys.org, and talks in detail about reading all types of maps, how to create your own maps, understanding global positioning systems, georeferencing maps, looking at satellite maps, contours, digital elevation models, and how to plan your own trails, basically. This will save you a lot of money and give you much more satisfaction than following 20 people in a commercial group to the same touristic places over and over again. Okay, we can probably take a few questions now. If any people on Instagram want to post any questions, or people on the Zoom here want to post any questions on the chat window, please go ahead now. I'll check out the chat window. Any questions, please post, guys, either on Instagram or on the Zoom. Any doubts or questions, feel free to shoot. I'll keep the session on mute, otherwise too much of noise is coming in. Just post the questions on the chat window. One question on Instagram is, could you give a few things around safety? So safety, again, I suggest you tune in on Tuesday. On Tuesday, I'm giving a session, which is not listed here, but session 8 will go on exploration, risks, and safeguards. So I'll give a few real world use cases at live 8 o'clock morning on Tuesday morning on life-threatening situations I faced in the Himalayas, and which are the safeguards against those things. I would warn everyone not to immediately go exploring solo immediately. It needs a good fitness level and sufficient experience before you venture alone, especially away from the lesser known routes where you'll get to encounter more challenging situations. Somebody is asking about the Sahyadri GPX files. Go to my blog, ultrajourneys.org, where you'll find the master map of the Sahyadris with more than 250 forts, beautiful traverses, like, as I mentioned, Lonavala all the way to Bandardara, hundreds of kilometers of beautiful forest trails to Mahabaleshwar, which you can simply download in OSM AMD on your phone, and you're good to go. You don't have to pay a local guide. You can fully explore by yourself. Gora Pass, Dolador range. Gora Pass I have not explored yet. I'll again give a presentation on Dolador in a cup next week sometime. Gora Pass does not sound familiar, so I think that should be still waiting for me to explore. So while planning in the Sahyadris for seasons other than the monsoon, how do you understand the water resources and position in the trails? Obviously, the Sahyadris are quite dry, right, from December, January onwards towards the summer. The water in the water tanks on top of the forts tend to get a little bad after December, I would say. You might have to carry a filter. But my main approach is to basically drink 1 liter of water, fill up your stomach at the base village. Then mostly I climb up the forts in 32 minutes to 1 hour, come down again, and drink again after coming down. I don't carry any water with me because, again, Sahyadris, those steep pinnacles don't really have those valleys and many side valleys like the Himalayas, where you will find abundant water everywhere. Okay, somebody replied on the previous pass. It's between the Singar and the Waru pass. Okay, thanks for the information. I'll check it out. I did Waru. I still have to do Singar also. Okay, one person on Zoom is asking about, can you share something about your experience, which was really difficult at that point of time as you were alone, and how did you find your way out of the problem? So I think both, anywhere you go, more than the terrain, I would say your main opponent, your main challenge is the weather. And just like in the Sahyadris, where during the monsoon it can become very slippery to traverse some of these exposed rock steps, exposed to like 200-meter steep drop down below. Similar in the Himalayas, as you go to higher altitudes, to 4,000 or 5,000 meters and above, the weather becomes more extreme and also becomes more volatile. So in 2018, I remember somewhere when I was traversing the Pir Panjal across the Chobia Pass, I made a mistake of trying to do this thing in a single day. So I ended up crossing the pass late afternoon, which is not recommended. Normally you should cross the high altitude passes in a stable weather window in the morning. So I crossed it by force, still was able to descend 700 meters, but then suddenly in the evening, I got stuck in a whiteout. Totally missed the routes down to get down in the valley. This was a shepherd route, so not very clear, no clear trail, not a well-known hiking route. Was not able to see, got stuck on all sides through vertical drops. So basically had to pitch up at a pretty high altitude here to spend the night in rains at 4,100 meters below the pass. And additionally, I had lost my tent the previous day. So I was basically sleeping under a small tarpaulin sheets, completely exposed to the rain and cold winds, not sleeping much that night, having to wait till the next morning to clear up the weather so I could find the trail again. 30 minutes later, I was having hot chai with a shepherd, which was just camping 500 meters below me. Unfortunately, I could not see him the previous night and proceed my journey. Okay, I see some other questions coming in. Just a second. Some of the questions disappeared fast. So let me see. Okay. How do you take care of bio breaks without affecting nature? Any advice? Again, I mean, when you go solo or in a small group, so you take your breaks, nature breaks, along the way, mostly in the morning. Again, when you drink this natural water for months altogether, your digestive system is very much okay. You have a very regular natural break, daily break. And you just, you just go in the forest, in the Alpine meadows, sometimes in the rock deserts of Ladakh. Sometimes you don't even have water to clean up. So as you get more experienced in this, you can manage in all kinds of terrains to do your bio. You typically cover up your stuff so that it doesn't, and go away from the trail or the campsite, obviously, so that it doesn't bother other people. Frequently asked question here from Shruti: do you encounter animals around these regions? So I've been roaming around in the dense jungles of South India, Karnataka, Kerala, Tamil Nadu and Andhra for more than a decade there, where you can have much more wildlife. You will have more likelihood for encounters, especially in dense jungles where the animals don't see you coming. In the barren landscape of the Himalayas, especially when you climb above the forests into the barren landscape, rock ice and meadows, you'll find less animals. The main thing with wild animals is to avoid confrontation, to avoid surprise. I'll explain this in one of the upcoming sessions in my Himalayan webinar. So you should always make sure that the animals see you coming, because they will only get scared, they will only kind of go and attack if you surprise them. So which means if you're, say, in a forest, or if you're on the turn of a valley, or when you're crossing a wild stream where it's very noisy and the animals don't hear you coming. So it's very important to always make your presence felt, that you avoid surprise, because by default, as long as you don't surprise the animals, they will not intend to attack you. This is for during the day. During the night, I suggest you always camp, if possible, in a shelter or with some shepherds or with some gujas, because again, camping all by yourself in the middle of a jungle could, of course, or near a water source, could be trouble if animals come to you. So again, I will talk about this in one of my upcoming Himalayan webinar sessions. One more question on from Vignesh on how do you manage water intake? Not necessarily you will find clean water everywhere. Carrying liters of water is also not comfortable. So again, Vignesh, so I spent now 5,000 kilometers in the Himalayas, believe it or not, but I have never carried a single drop of water with me. During the 6 months in the Himalayas, you will find water everywhere actually, even in the high altitude deserts of Zanskar and Lahaul. As I mentioned, just like with food, you intelligently plan your food ration and the villages in between. Same with water. Whenever you cross a stream, whenever you cross a clean water source, you'll have to fill up your stomach. And once you drink 1 liter of water, I can guarantee you, you can easily go for 2-3 hours until the next stream. So finding water is all about understanding the terrain, the topography. If you're comfortable with contour maps and topographic maps, you will know when the next side stream will come where you'll find clean water. I say side stream because most of the main streams in the main valleys are so forceful, the water current, then they will mostly take along soil and they will become muddy. And one more aspect about water is, I mean, the water, even from snow, melting snow and glaciers, is pretty pristine, pretty clean. You can drink it directly. I don't think you need filters. I see a lot of Europeans hiking in Ladakh and Zanskar with these live straw water filters. I've been drinking from jungles and from mountains for the last 20 years. And if you look at me, I'm still a pretty healthy guy. So there's nothing as good as natural water, as long as they are running water and they're clear. One guy is asking, Mohan, how do you plan the first time to go solo exploration? So as I mentioned in the presentation, after I quit my job in 2017, my first big unknown, kind of a bit scary step on solo into the mountains in a totally new place was North Vietnam, where I ran 2,000 kilometers. I was completely new to that part of the world. I didn't speak the language also. And I was basically going on a long journey completely alone. Normally, I'm used to hiking with groups of 20, 30 people in the Chennai Trekking Club for the last 10 years in our group in Chennai. So going solo is definitely a big change for us social human beings. We're always used to social contact. So being all by yourself, especially in the middle of nowhere in the wilderness, in the remotest corners of the Himalayas, is initially a little bit scary because we are not used to being alone. We have become so social that even when we're alone at home in the city, we sometimes become a little bit feel alone. But I can tell you now, after 2 years of hiking alone, mostly 90% of the time, with a couple of friends joining in between, I've actually gotten to like this way of traveling. Going alone allows you to be completely free. You can decide your own schedule. You can decide your own stops, food breaks, night halts. You can decide your route. There is nobody else, so you can go at your own comfortable pace. And it's a very spiritual and very peaceful experience to be all alone. You're fully indulged in your surroundings rather than chit-chatting with the people who go along with you. Let's see any other questions on Insta here. Somebody is asking on Zoom, Rabindra, what is your objective in the entire exercise? Is it simple trying to cover the maximum number of forts or passes in the shortest time possible? Don't you miss out on talking to people and simply soaking up the scenery? I think that's an excellent question, Ravindra. Given the fact that I'm still a little bit young, I feel, not fully reached mature life yet. I'm still in this mode, right? Many of the runners out there, it's all about time, pace, distance. People want to quickly reach their objective. I personally admit that when I head out to the Himalayas, I always have this number in my head: 120 forts, 120 passes, 200 forts. So I always seem to be in a hurry. I still have to learn, I think, to become more peacefully. Even though I take a lot of photos, I take quite a few stops, shoot a lot of videos on the way, do a lot of blogging. I think I still much more of a like an ultra runner who is running morning till evening. I used to run these trail races, international trail races in Europe, where you run 100 miles, 160 kilometers non-stop through 2 nights and 2 days. Unfortunately, indeed, missing out on a lot of the beauty and the experiences along the way. So I hope as I grow older that I focus less on numbers and more on experiences along the way. Excellent question. Let me see the Insta. So what things do you keep in mind when you go trek, such as gears and all? So I suggest you refer to session 3 here, weather and gears, in my Himalayan webinars. I posted the recording, the Zoom recording, on my blog, ultrajourneys.org, as well on Instagram last week. It gives an excellent overview on which are the various gears I carry, the gears necessary to traverse the different Himalayan terrains, which are much more challenging than the Western Ghats, and the same gears also which keep you safe in extreme weather conditions. I'll also be giving one more session as part of hosted by Decathlon ETF Bangalore, live session on Instagram on Wednesday. You can check my stories for the exact timing and the Instagram account, where I will be giving a 30-minute session on Himalayan terrains and gears. Question from Vignesh: have you ever encountered being sick in the middle of solo running trekking? If yes, how did you face that challenge, and what advice would you give to people to face such situations? Excellent question, Vignesh. So one of the main dangers of going solo, solo is one thing, but then also the fact that you're exploring the lesser known regions. You're not going on pilgrim routes or more used hiking routes where there will be tens or hundreds of other hikers going through the same way. So you'll always have a backup. Somebody will always find you if you have an injury or if you fall sick. If you go exploring solo to the unknown regions, obviously, if anything happens to you, you're on your own. Nobody is there to get help or even know that anything is wrong with you. So here it will depend completely on yourself, basically your physical fitness level and your mental toughness. And one thing I can assure you, you might have certain ideas about your physical and mental limits. But as you do these solo exploration trips in the remotest corners of the Himalayas, you'll really be surprised how far you can push yourself if anything happens. Sometimes if you run out of food, you're hungry for a whole day because you're underplanned your ration. You don't find a water source and you're without water for 6 to 8 hours. Sometimes you're exposed, like I said, I got stuck in the Chobia Pass, had to sleep in the nights, in the rains, in the cold exposed wind without a tent at 4,100 meters. So all these experiences really make you mentally very tough, much more than going on a touristic journey excursion with a commercial group where the route is well laid out, the food is carried for you, the tomato soup is waiting at the end of the day, the tent is pitched up. So going really Alpine style solo is a much more intense experience. I would call it a much more satisfying experience, which as you do more and more of it, you will really become very mentally and physically tough. And even if you fall sick or you twist an ankle or sprain a leg, that you be able to push yourself by yourself and get back to safety. To come back then to the second question, has this ever appeared to me? No, it has so far never happened to me. But I'm sure if it happens to me, that I'll push through pretty hard mentally to get me through some of these tough situations. Excellent question. Have you ever experienced any threat from the local people or the forest people? Again, as I tell you, the kind of people we meet in the cities here, the cities where everyone is basically polluted in terms of materialism, career, money making. The people you are meeting in the mountains, especially the mountain tribes, the Yomtalong villagers, you might see them as wild people, but they are really extremely innocent. They have still their humanity intact. They live sustainable with nature. They live independent of the economy. We all will be affected by the lockdown due to the economic impacts, but the people there won't even know that Corona has happened. People there live completely independent, fully self-sustained. If they see anyone coming there in the lesser explored routes, especially again as a solo traveler, they will, even though you don't speak the local language, they will host you with open arms. They will treat you as one of their own families, let them sleep in their beds, make food for you, fresh tea, give you night shelter. If you try to pitch up your tent outside their primitive settlement, they will immediately tell you not to do it and invite you in their home. So I think 50% of my experience of my satisfaction in these long and journeys, ultra journeys, is not just about the natural beauty, but is also about encounters with human beauty. Somebody is asking how much time did you take for the whole expedition? So if you're referring to the Sahyadris, I finished 200 forts in new places. I'd never been to these forts again. Before, I mean. So I did 200 forts in 2 months. If I would do it again, I'm sure I could do it even in lesser time. Once you get familiar with the routes, either the passes or the forts, you can go much faster actually. I mainly did this at this pace, doing some 6 to 8 forts in a day because I was going light and because I was going fast. You can watch one of my webinar sessions, which I did today, I believe, today morning. I will be posting it on Instagram later today, a dedicated session on minimalism and fast hiking, which will teach you all the techniques to go light and fast. Okay, if there are any further questions, so in case the session closes, we only have 1 hour on Instagram. If you have any further questions, you can tune in at 8 o'clock today evening. Decathlon is hosting a Q&A session on their page. You can see my Instagram for further details. The Instagram account is called Trek with Chennai. So you can catch me 1 hour live on Q&A today evening. Just letting you know in case this session closes early. A few more questions here on Zoom. When are you planning your runs? Are you able to read up on the history, culture, and people of the region you will be traversing? Have you been lost in the wilds? If so, how did you get back on the routes to the nearest hamlets? So these are all excellent questions, Rabindra. I'm planning, typically I spend quite a bit of time planning my runs, like for the 120 passes this summer in the Himalayas, which is over 3,500 kilometers. I spend at least 3 to 4 weeks looking over satellite maps, topographic maps, looking at all kinds of hiking databases, blogs, and looking for GPS logs on the web to create one big master map with all the necessary info on the routes to get to these passes. Many of these passes are only used by shepherds or totally not documented, obviously, anywhere on the internet. Shepherds don't blog. And the routes are also not very touristic, which means very few people go on these routes. And given the fragile landscape of the Himalayas, with frequent landslides, extreme weather at high altitudes, especially the routes and the trails near the passes where you go over rock and ice are far from obvious. So you need to do indeed a lot of homework for weeks and weeks to plan and study the terrain. One benefit is that I've documented all these efforts and all these maps on my blog, ultrajourneys.org. So it shouldn't be much easier and faster for you to do the same journeys yourself by looking at my blog downloading the routes which I mapped out over weeks in your phone and navigating those routes. Good question is then on, do you read up on history, culture, and the people? I wish I would do that. This again would make it a more complete experience, knowing the wildlife, the fauna, the flora, the people, the culture will definitely make it a much more enjoyable experience. Myself, I also have the limitation that I'm not fluent in Hindi, so I have limited opportunity to have deep conversation with local people. If you go with a group, you have a local porter and a guide with you, to which you can talk and get to learn more about the culture. If you, of course, go solo in the mountains, there is less opportunity to engage with the locals, except for the shepherds and the mountain drives on your way. But I admit it would definitely be very useful to study, to read up on the region a little bit more before heading out. I think that's one more area that's an excellent tip where I have to improve, as I mostly am pretty exhausted looking at weeks and weeks of maps, zooming in to spot remote trails and villages that after a couple of weeks I have enough and I just want to head out to the mountains without reading more days on culture and history. Have you been lost in the wilds? Definitely. Again, as long as you're on a pilgrim route or a well-known hiking route, it's easy to stay on track. The route is clear. There is a clear path, which is traversed by hundreds of other hikers. If you go exploring the lesser-known routes, likely you're going to get lost, because in many places the route will fade out in a forest. It will be completely gone in an open meadow, so you don't know. You come into the meadow in a clear trail and the trail disappears. Once you go on the moraines and the glaciers, forget it. The terrain keeps changing there. The ice keeps melting. The moraines keep moving on top of melting glaciers. So the trail actually will be destroyed every year. That way, basically, you need to build trail trekking skills. If you go to my previous session, Maps and Navigation, Module 6, in the Himalayan webinar series, I will tell you various ways how you can find your trail by tracking footsteps, tracking animal droppings, looking at cairns, looking at various type of carrying an altimeter and topographic map, carrying a compass and a paper map. Or again, I mean, in my case, I really spent a lot of time on satellite maps for the undocumented routes to really zoom into those satellite maps and find sections of the trail which are clearly visible, to have at least a couple of reference points. As otherwise, I think it's simply impossible to find some of these shepherd routes by yourself. So how did you get back en route or to the nearest hamlet when you get lost? So when you get lost, basically, there are two ways. You can either track back. So tracking back again can be done by putting a digital breadcrumb trail. So once you go off route, I've strongly suggested that you put waypoints every couple of hundred of meters, that you don't completely lose the trail and are even not able to go back, which can be very dangerous in the Himalayas, where you can be completely stuck, surrounded on all ways through steep vertical drops, impossible to get out of those. So it's impossible always to be able to be backtracked by looking at your recorded trail or putting some waypoints. And yeah, in many cases, the Himalayas are so steep that only the used road, only the route, the actual trail, is the only way you're gonna get out. If you try to go off trail straight to dense jungles, dense steep forests, you're gonna mostly end up in trouble. Next question on Zoom is, do you carry first aid? Personally, I never carry first aid. I don't care about cuts or bleeding wounds or bumping my shin onto some rock or so. Over the decades, doing hundreds of treks in the south and north, I become pretty outdoor proof. One thing where you can probably consider first aid, I would say, because that can be life-threatening, is acclimatization. If somebody is joining you for the first 1 week to get acclimatized, I think it's very important to carry some, like say, some Dymox, and more than like post medicine, I would say carry like an oximeter with you, a small medical device you can clip onto somebody's finger to see when a person is running low on oxygen in his blood, so you can take him to lower altitude before anything more severe happens. Somebody is asking specific questions. Have you climbed the Mangi-Tungi hills in Satana, Nasik? Mangi-Tungi sounds familiar. I think I covered that place, and I think that's in the Nasik side. Meanwhile, our Instagram video is ended, 900 viewers, not bad. So just close the session and continue on Zoom. On Zoom, we don't have any time limits. So next question, have you encountered any wild animals? From Leah? Definitely, Leah. I mean, wild animals are there. But as I tell everyone, everyone is assessing or is seeing animals as wild. From my experience of 2 decades into the wild, it's more people who are wild. In the sense that I have less positive experiences with people on my way than the animals who live peacefully in their own territory. Again, as I told previously, animals are never really a threat to you as long as you make your presence felt, as long as you don't surprise them, as long as you don't corner them, animals are not going to attack you. You also always leave them a way to go. I've seen like hundreds of snakes, especially in the wild. I've been face to face with bears, both in the Himalayas and in the jungles of like Andhra. So as long as you don't provoke animals, you remain calm, you don't make any sudden moves. As long as you stay in proper shelters, caves, if possible, try to reach to the next shepherd or the next mountain tribe after crossing the path. You should be pretty okay from any wild animal attacks. Let me see if there are any other questions in the Zoom which are still pending. Thanks, guys, for the excellent questions. I think many of the questions here brought up were pretty good. Just wanted to check if my host has been able to join to give a small closing session. I see Praveen from Spotbooks, unfortunately. Thanks for setting up the session. He was not able to come in, unfortunately. Okay, let me see anything else. Now, one more question here was, how are you able to communicate? Was language never a problem? This is what I've been telling all the way, whether it's Vietnam, whether it's North India, where again, being Chennai based, I mostly fluent in English and a little bit of Tamil. I don't speak Hindi. Language is never a barrier. As you go into the wild in the mountains, your basic needs are guidance, shelter, and food. And these 3 things you can easily manage with a smile, with sign language, with facial expressions. Again, as you meet these people staying in the upper ranges of the Himalayas, the shepherds, the mountain tribes, you just immediately connect with somebody. You can see the face. If you see a smile, a friendly face, you know the people will host you. They will give you food. They will give you stay. If you see a more like angry face or an unpleasant face, you better keep your distance and just ignore that person. So hospitality can easily be read from the faces itself. All right, any other questions? Again, I think that's it. No further questions. If there are any doubts, anyway, you can join today's evening 8 o'clock session hosted by Decathlon at Trek with Chennai Instagram. Any further questions, I'll be answering there. Please do tune in to my daily Himalayan webinars. I think thanks to the lockdown, normally I don't spend much time on presentations or on talks, but thanks to the lockdown, I've been doing a pretty good job in creating a beautiful series of nice short modules, 15 minutes each, which captures so much of valuable knowledge and experience which you can learn from, which took me years and years to understand. So have a look at these to become more experienced and have a more enjoyable journey into the wild. Thanks for joining, guys. I'll put the recording on Insta and Zoom in case you want it for future reference. Hope to see you on the mountain somewhere later on. Bye-bye.